The sun had only just begun its slow climb over Highway 41, spilling long ribbons of gold across the frost-slick grass. Morning light kissed the glass jars lined neatly on the rough wooden planks of the roadside stand, each filled with ruby red strawberry jam that caught the day's first warmth like captured summer. The stand leaned slightly to one side, its legs uneven from years of rain and sun. But to Lucy Carter, it was a kingdom. She stood on her tiptoes to rearrange the jars so that each one faced the road at the exact same angle, the labels straight, the prices written in bold black marker. Her small fingers worked with practiced precision, and every so often she stepped back, squinting, to make sure the sunlight struck them just right. Mabel always said good presentation was half the sale. Lucy, honey, don't forget the price. Tags, came her grandmother's voice from the cottage porch, carrying the gentle authority of someone who had raised more than one stubborn child. Already done. Grandma, Lucy called back, her dark curls bouncing as she gave the final, jarring approving nod. She wore a patched denim jacket to sizes too big, sleeves rolled up past her elbows, and a red scarf she insisted made her look professional at 7 years old. Lucy had the unshakable confidence of someone who didn't yet know the limits of the world. She spoke to strangers without a hint of hesitation, her bright eyes and sure smile often convincing passersby to buy an extra jar or two. Without quite knowing why, the cottage behind them was modest. 2 bedrooms, a kitchen that always smelled faintly of cinnamon and vanilla, and a living room with a sagging sofa that had seen more years than Lucy had. But the love inside was fierce and constant, a shelter stronger than any brick wall. As the traffic thinned from the morning rush, Lucy skipped over to the patch of grass by the ditch, scanning for new additions to her bottle cap collection. She had hundreds now, sorted by color in an old biscuit tin greens, silvers, golds, deep cobalt blues. But her favorite was the red one, worn smooth around the edges, with a faint imprint of a soda logo you could barely read. She kept it in her pocket always, certain it held a kind of magic, though she couldn't explain why. She spotted a silver cap glinting near the road and darted toward it, pausing only when a car roared by too close for comfort. Mabel's voice sharpened from the porch. Careful, Lucy. Some folks drive like the devil's on their tail. I'm fine, Lucy replied, but she stepped back from the asphalt. She knew her grandmother worried, though Mabel tried not to show it. Sometimes Lucy would catch her looking at the road with a faraway frown, as if she could see something coming that no one else could. Lucy returned with her fine, adding it to her tin, then pulled out the red cap and held it up so the sunlight blazed through it like a tiny stingle. Ask window. It's going to be important someday, she told Mabel. Mabel smiled, but her knitting needles paused mid-stitch. I'm sure it will be, honey. I'm sure it will. Neither of them knew the road in front of their stand would soon bring more than customers. Something was racing toward them, carried on the hum of tires and the smell of gasoline, and it would change everything. The afternoon sun had shifted higher, its warmth stretching across the cracked pavement of Highway 41. When the day took a turn Lucy would never forget. The quiet hum of distant engines had become part of the background, blending with the rustle of autumn leaves in the roadside ditch. Lucy was on her knees in the grass, building another treasure map from her bottle caps, carefully aligning them into crooked lines and twisting arcs when she felt, more than heard, the sudden shudder in the air. It began with a sound, like the sky itself tearing a deep, violent screech of tires biting into asphalt. Birds exploded from the branches overhead, their wings flashing against the pale blue. Lucy's head snapped up. Round the bend, a black Mustang appeared, not gliding down the highway like the other cars, but hurtling wild, uncontrolled. Sunlight flashed off its polished hood as it swerved hard, clipping the gravel shoulder. The smell of burnt rubber came even before the sound fully hit, sharp and acrid in the cool air. Lucy, get back. Mabel's voice cracked like a whip, but Lucy didn't move, not yet. The Mustang veered again, skidding sideways until it slammed nose first into the guardrail with a metallic howl. The impact sent a shower of sparks into the air, each one dying before it touched the ground, and the hood buckled with a sickening crunch. For a moment, everything was still. Steam hissed from under the crumpled hood, then faint at first, but growing smoke began curling upward, dark and thick. A few cars slowed, some drivers craning their necks to see, but none stopped. Lucy's chest felt tight. There was someone inside. She could see the driver's silhouette, slumped forward against the steering wheel. She stood. Her feet moved before her mind could catch up. Lucy. No. Mabel was running down the porch steps, but Lucy was already halfway to the wreck. Gravel bit into her knees as she skidded to the driver's side door. She pulled on the handle that wouldn't budge. She tugged again, hard enough that the metal bit into her palms. The man inside stirred, his head turning slightly. His face was pale under streaks of soot, his eyes dazed and unfocused. "Sir, you have to get out," Lucy yelled, her voice high and fierce. She could hear the low, sinister crackle from under the hood now. A whiff of gasoline burned her nose. A semi-truck had pulled onto the shoulder behind them. Air brakes hissing. A tall man in a grease-stained cap jumped down, shouting, "Kid, move back." But Lucy didn't. She wedged her fingers into the small gap in the door frame, braced her sneakers against the side of the car, and pulled with everything she had. The latch gave with a metallic pop, and the door swung open just enough for the trucker to reach in and grab the man's arm. They hauled him out together, his weight heavy and unsteady. The trucker slung the man's arm over his own shoulder, half carrying him toward the safety of the grass. Lucy trotted alongside, her hand gripping the man's sleeve as if she were afraid letting go would undo the rescue entirely. The man coughed, blinking at her through the haze. For a fraction of a second, their eyes met hers wide and unflinching, his searching for something he didn't yet understand. Then the air behind them shifted. A loud whoosh as the Mustang's hood erupted in orange flame. Sirens wailed in the distance, drawing closer. Mabel's arms wrapped tight around Lucy, pulling her back as paramedics rushed in. They guided the man onto a stretcher, clipping oxygen over his mouth. Lucy's heart was still racing, but her grip on the red bottle cap in her pocket was steady. She didn't know why, but it felt warmer now. And as the ambulance doors closed, she couldn't shake the strange feeling that she hadn't just saved a stranger's life. She collided with something that had been speeding toward her all along. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and something else, something metallic and faint, like rain on rust. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, bleaching the world into shades of white and pale green. Lucy sat on a hard plastic chair in the emergency waiting area, swinging her legs that didn't quite reach the floor. Mabel was beside her, fingers knitting in quick, nervous bursts, though she dropped more stitches than she caught. Across the lobby, sliding glass doors whispered open and closed as people came and went, some with flowers, some with worry etched into their faces. The air was thick with hushed conversations, the occasional cough, and the faint wail of a baby somewhere down the hall. Lucy's eyes kept drifting to the corridor that led deeper into the emergency ward. Somewhere past those double doors was the man she pulled from the burning Mustang. She didn't know his name, but she could still feel the weight of his sleeve in her hand. The strange jolt that had passed between them in that fleeting eye contact. "We're just here to make sure he's all right," Mabel said, more to herself than to Lucy. "Then we're going home." Lucy tilted her head. "But what if he needs us? We can't just leave." Mabel's knitting paused mid-row. "Honey, that man's got all the help in the world, more than folks like us could ever give." The words were meant to end the conversation, but they didn't. Lucy's gaze wandered again to the hallway just in time to catch a glimpse of a man in a crisp suit, stepping out of a room, a clipboard in hand, followed by two nurses wheeling a cart. She leaned forward, but the glimpse was gone. A low rumble of voices rose from behind the nurses' station. Lucy didn't mean to listen, but the words floated over clearly enough. "Robert Mitchell. Car accident on Highway 41. Lucky to be alive." Her ears pricked at the name. Robert Mitchell. She repeated it silently, tasting it like a secret. One of the nurses lowered her voice, but Lucy still caught it. "He's the Robert Mitchell, real estate mogul, owns half the downtown properties." The other nurse let out a low whistle. "Didn't his wife die years back? What was her name? Rebecca?" Lucy's head jerked. "Rebecca." Her heart gave a tiny, confused leap. She turned toward Mabel, who had gone very still. "Grandma," Lucy whispered. "Did Mama Rebecca know a Robert Mitchell?" For a moment, Mabel's face was unreadable. Then her eyes darted toward the double doors and back. "It's complicated, Lucy." Her knitting needles clinked together harder than before. Lucy didn't know why, but she suddenly wanted to see him again, not just because she'd saved him, but because the name Rebecca felt like a string tugging at something deep inside her. She slid off the chair and started toward the hallway before Mabel noticed, slipping into the stream of people heading to the ward. The air was cooler here, the smell of disinfectant sharper. Door after door passed in a blur until she spotted one slightly ajar. Inside, Robert Mitchell sat propped up in bed, a hospital gown draped over his tall frame, an oxygen tube looped beneath his nose, his eyes sharp, gray, assessing where fixed on the open window, where the curtains fluttered faintly in the air. He didn't see her at first. Lucy's fingers tightened around the red bottle cap in her pocket. She didn't know why, but standing there felt like teetering on the edge of something vast and dangerous, like the moment before you step off a high ledge into unknown water. And then he turned his head. Their eyes met again. This time, he didn't look away. Lucy froze in the doorway, her small frame half hidden by the edge of the wall. The beeping of the heart monitor filled the silence between them, steady, but not without weight. Robert Mitchell's gaze locked on her, not in the casual way strangers glance at children, but with an intensity that seemed to strip the moment of all background noise. "You," he said softly, voice roughened from smoke and exhaustion. Lucy's fingers curled around the doorframe. "Me? You're the little girl from the road." His tone wasn't a question, it was certainty. He studied her as though memorizing every detail, his eyes darting briefly to the smudge of soot still on her cheek. Lucy stepped in, closing the door behind her without thinking. "I wanted to make sure you were okay. You didn't look okay when we pulled you out." The faintest flicker of a smile crossed his lips, but it vanished quickly, replaced by something she couldn't read. "I'm alive because of you," she shrugged, suddenly shy but unwilling to break eye contact. "You would have gotten out." His gaze lingered on her, heavy with an unspoken question. Then he tilted his head slightly, like he was trying to match her face to a memory. "What's your name?" "Lucy. Lucy Carter." Something in him shifted at the last name, barely visible, but it was there. He sat up straighter, ignoring the tug of the four in his arm. "Carter," he repeated slowly, as though the syllables carried weight. Before Lucy could ask why, the door creaked open. Mabel stood there, her breath just slightly uneven, her knitting bag clutched tightly in one hand. Her eyes flicked between them, and a shadow passed over her face. "I'm sorry, sir," she said briskly. "My granddaughter was just leaving." Robert's brows drew together. "Your granddaughter?" His eyes moved from Mabel back to Lucy, something sharp flashing behind them. "Carter," he said again, more firmly this time. "Your mother?" Mabel's voice cut in quickly, almost too quickly. "That's not a conversation for today." She stepped forward, placing a gentle but firm hand on Lucy's shoulder. Lucy looked up at her grandmother, confusion knotting in her chest. "He knows Mama's name, Grandma. I heard the nurses talking. They said his wife's name was Rebecca." Robert's expression hardened, not with anger, but with the dawning of something that looked a lot like recognition. Rebecca. He let the name linger on his tongue, his gaze never leaving Lucy. "That's enough." Mabel interrupted, her voice suddenly edged with steel. The tension in the room thickened, so taut Lucy felt she could pluck it like a guitar string. Robert leaned back against the pillows, but his eyes stayed locked on Mabel. "You knew," he said quietly, not accusing yet not gentle either. Mabel's jaw worked. "Some truths do more harm than good." The words hung in the air like smoke from a dying fire. Lucy's heart was pounding, though she didn't understand why. She only knew that something important was happening, something that had everything to do with her. Robert's voice dropped to a near whisper, but Lucy heard it all the same. "She has Rebecca's eyes." Mabel didn't answer. Her hand on Lucy's shoulder tightened, steering her toward the hallway. But Lucy's own fingers slipped into her pocket, curling around the red bottle cap. For the first time, it didn't just feel magical, it felt like a key. As the door closed behind them, Robert stared at the space where Lucy had stood, a single truth pressing hard against the edges of his mind. If what he suspected was real, the accident hadn't been an accident at all. It was the hand of fate, delivering someone he lost before he even knew he had her. Ass checked. The storm rolled in without warning that night, lightning flashing like fractured glass across the hospital windows. Lucy sat cross-legged on the cot in Mabel's small guest room, unable to sleep. She turned the red bottle cap over and over in her palm, its ridged edge pressing into her skin. It felt heavier now, as if it carried the weight of everything that had happened in Robert Mitchell's hospital room. Down the hall, she heard the soft creak of floorboards, the sound of Mabel moving toward the kitchen. Lucy slipped quietly from the bed, her bare feet making no sound on the cool linoleum. She stopped just outside the doorway, watching her grandmother's silhouette framed in the dim light over the sink. Mabel's shoulders were hunched, her hands gripping the counter like she was holding herself up. "You knew him," Lucy said softly. Mabel stiffened but didn't turn around. You should be asleep. Lucy, I can't. Lucy stepped into the kitchen, the bottle cap clenched in her fist. He knows Mama. He said her name. You didn't even let him finish. Mabel's knuckles whitened against the countertop. That man has nothing to do with us. Lucy swallowed hard. He looked at me like he knew me. Mabel turned then, her eyes bright with something Lucy had never seen before. Fear. Sharp and unguarded. Some knowledge. Lucy is dangerous. Once you hear it, you can't unhear it. And once you feel it, you can't let it go. Before Lucy could answer, a hard knock rattled the back door. Both of them jumped. Mabel moved first, her hand instinctively pressing Lucy behind her. She cracked the door just enough to see. A hospital security guard stood there, rain dripping from his cap. Evening, man. Sorry to disturb you this late, but I was asked to give you this. He handed her a sealed envelope, came from Mr. Mitchell's room. Mabel took it slowly, nodding without a word. She closed the door and turned the envelope in her hands. Lucy could see her grandmother's pulse fluttering at her throat. What is it? Lucy asked. Mabel didn't answer right away. She moved to the table, tore the seal, and slid out a single folded sheet of paper. Her eyes scanned it quickly, and for a moment Lucy thought Mabel might actually faint. It's nothing, Mabel said quickly, crumpling the page in her fist. But a scrap of it slipped free, drifting to the floor before Mabel could grab it. Lucy darted forward, snatching it up. Two words leapt out at her in dark, urgent ink. My daughter. Her breath caught. It's about me. Mabel reached for the scrap, but Lucy pulled it back. Why didn't you tell me? The air in the room seemed to close in. Pressing down on both of them, Mabel's voice broke. Because the truth will change everything, Lucy. And I'm not sure either of us is ready for what comes after. Thunder boomed outside, shaking the windows, somewhere deep inside. Lucy knew that no matter how hard Mabel tried to keep the past buried, it was already clawing its way to the surface. And if Robert Mitchell was telling the truth, the storm outside was nothing compared to the one coming for them. The hospital at night was nothing like it was during the day. Gone were the bright chatter of nurses, the smell of coffee from the cafeteria, the clatter of carts in the hallway. Instead, the place breathed in hushed echoes, low hums from fluorescent lights, the occasional hiss of a vent, the quiet squeak of rubber soles somewhere far off. Lucy had never been here alone before. The storm still rumbled outside, streaks of lightning casting brief, skeletal shadows through the long corridor windows. Every flash made her jump, but she kept walking, her sneakers whispering over the polished floor. She had waited until Mabel fell asleep on the couch, the crumpled letter clutched in her lap. Lucy had carefully slipped the scrap with my daughter from Mabel's loose fingers and tucked it in her pocket, next to the red bottle cap. It was all she needed to know. Robert Mitchell had written it for her. Room 317 was at the far end of the hall. She could see the door from where she stood now, slightly ajar, a sliver of dim lamplight spilling out into the corridor. Her heart thudded in her chest, loud enough she was sure someone would hear it. She stopped when she reached the doorframe. Robert was awake, sitting propped up against his pillows. An oxygen tube looped under his nose. He was staring at the ceiling, as if listening to something far away. Lucy stepped inside. He turned his head, and for a heartbeat, neither of them spoke. I thought you weren't allowed to visit me, he said at last, his voice rough. They don't know I'm here, Lucy answered, standing straighter than she felt. His gaze softened just slightly. You remind me of someone. My mother, she said. Rebecca Carter. Something in his expression broke. It wasn't shock, more like the collapse of a dam that had been holding back too much water for too long. He tried to speak, but his throat worked soundlessly for a moment. How much has Mabel told you? Lucy shook her head. Only that she died when I was born, and that I'm supposed to be brave. Robert's hand trembled as he reached toward the drawer in his bedside table. He pulled out a small velvet pouch, dark and worn from age. He set it in her hands. Open it. He said inside was a delicate gold necklace, its pendant shaped like a small coin. On its face was an engraving to letters intertwined. RM, where Lucy's fingers touched the metal. It was warm, almost alive. That belonged to your mother, Robert said. I gave it to her the night I told her I loved her, and the night I lost her. Lucy's breath caught. Why are you telling me this? Because you deserve to know. His voice cracked. I'm your father. Before she could respond, a shadow shifted in the hallway. Heavy footsteps approached, quick and purposeful. Robert's eyes flicked toward the door, his face tightening. "You shouldn't be here," he whispered urgently. "They'll stop us from talking. Go now." Lucy froze. But the footsteps grew louder. The shadow on the floor stretched toward her like a hand reaching out. She clutched the necklace, the red bottle cap pressing into her palm with it, and bolted into the hall, just as a figure stepped out of the darkness, blocking her path. The figure blocking Lucy's path wasn't a nurse, or a doctor, or anyone in a crisp uniform. He was tall, dressed in a black raincoat that gleamed under the dim hallway lights. Drops of stormwater still rolling off the fabric. His face was partly shadowed by the brim of a soaked baseball cap, but Lucy could see his eyes cold, sharp, and fixed on her. "You shouldn't be here, kid," he said, his voice deep and low. Lucy's fingers tightened around the necklace and the red bottle cap. In her pocket. "I'm just visiting someone. That someone's not supposed to have visitors." He stepped closer, blocking the hall completely, "Especially not you." Something in his tone made the hairs rise on the back of her neck. She glanced over her shoulder toward room 317, but the door was closed now. Robert hadn't called out. He hadn't tried to stop this man. "I don't even know you," Lucy said, taking a step back. "You don't need to," the man replied. "But I know you, and I know your grandmother. You've been sticking your nose where it doesn't belong." A flicker of lightning lit the hallway, throwing his shadow across her. Lucy's mind was spinning. How could he possibly know Mabel, and why did it sound like a threat? "Let me through," she demanded, putting every bit of her fearless market stand voice into it. For a second, he almost smiled. "Brave, just like your mother. But bravery won't help you if you keep digging where the ground's rotten." The storm outside roared. Lucy heard the distant slam of a door somewhere deeper in the hospital. She made her move, ducking low, just like she had when weaving through crowded customers at the jam stand, and darted past him. He reached out, but she was faster, her sneakers skidding over the slick tile. Behind her, his footsteps followed for several yards, and then stopped. When she finally turned back, the hallway was empty. No sign of him, no wet footprints. Lucy didn't stop running until she was outside, the rain hitting her face in stinging sheets. She dashed across the parking lot to the corner of the ambulance bay, pressing herself against the cold brick wall to catch her breath. The necklace was still in her hand. She opened her fingers. The gold pendant gleamed faintly in the stormlight, and the red bottle cap stuck to her palm, wet but warm from her grip. She didn't understand how, but she knew these two things were connected, and so was that man. Through the rain, she spotted Mabel's old truck pulling into the lot, headlights sweeping over the wet pavement. Her grandmother jumped out before the engine even stopped, her face pale and tight. "Lucy," Mabel's voice cracked. "Get in the truck, now." Lucy obeyed, sliding into the worn seat. The moment the door shut, Mabel threw the truck into gear and sped out of the lot without another word. The hospital faded into the storm behind them. But Lucy caught one last glimpse in the side mirror, a tall figure in a raincoat, standing under the ambulance bay light, watching them go. He raised his hand not to wave, but as if in warning, and in that moment, Lucy knew that finding her father was only the start of something much bigger, something dangerous.